Hello.
Okay.
How's it going? Hey, Mark. Welcome to join.
Hey, glad I can finally make it.
Yeah, cool. So, we check the doc. On the agenda, yeah. So, all right, we have, let me share my screen. Right. Sorry, wrong button. Share. Ah. 1 second. You see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, but let's get the topic right. So I think this is the agenda for today. So we have actions from Alex. We have logging, deviation correction. Okay, deviation transaction. Any other topics that we wanted to discuss? So Alex, your it seems to be your meeting, which is good. If not, then I would give the floor to Alex, right? If that's okay, Alexander.
Yep. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, a couple of things to discuss. Some of these we spoke about needing to cover some at the first meeting. This first one about actions. This comes from a request from inside Swisscom. Some of our CNFs use netconf actions to complete setup phases. So, for example, we would have a CNF where you would configure some values, some data for as part of the day one. Then you would execute a netconf action to do something like initialize a database or connect the CNF to an existing cluster of CNFs. And then you could proceed with day two afterwards. But currently, these netconf actions are not supported in SDC.
Yeah.
And we need to figure out a way to have these actions done. I think that the workaround we have currently is that we would do the day one config with SDC, and then have a job that would fire once the config is ready, that would then perform this action as a manual step.
Are these actions to be performed all the time, or is it just once?
Just once in this specific case. So the actions that we have are for various different CNFs have different uses for actions. In this case, it would be this initialized database, or I don't remember exactly what the action is called, but it's a sort of join cluster where you have already the other CNFs have already. The first one will do initialized database, and then everything else will join onto this database of the same CNF kind. Then we have other actions which are done usually for things like monitoring and debugging, where you can go and use actions to get the state of the CNF and state of connections and this kind of thing. But that would be less on the configuration management side and more on the sort of maintaining things and checking. So I think that part doesn't need to be covered by SDC. But the day one stuff where we have an action at the end to sort of finalize the day one config on that CNF, this is something that we would need.
Yeah, so the thing is that we have right now, right? So we now have grouping on a per target basis, right? So which means that all of the configs or all the changes are happening as a transaction, right? Now, I think so, but the thing here, what we could do is say, so add somewhere in the config an action blob, right? That is executing. The question is then, when do you execute it, right? So in other words, the thing is that so for example, on target bring up, right? So when the target comes back up, what we do is we take all the config snippets in, right, that were applied, and then we initialize it. So, but I have the feeling that you cannot, one easy option is you do it all the time, right? So for every transaction you execute, you first do the transaction to see whether a config applies, then you perform an action, right? So you have a pre-action or a post-action, probably. And so pre is before you do the transaction, post is after you do the transaction. But then can you execute them all the time or not?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so that would be a way to go about it, right? So that we basically, so we can either, how we model it, we have to look at it, right? But so either we do it in the config or something like that, CR somewhere, or we have to look at the specifics. But so you somehow have a place to do a pre-actions or actions, I think it would be, right? Because I'm assuming that for the future we can do multiple, and then we have post-actions, and then we have a way to convey them somehow.
Yeah.
That work, but so that means what is more straightforward to do in this case is to execute it all the time. So for every transaction that you do, you always do the pre-actions and the post-actions. And if that would work, I think that would be something, yeah. I mean, we have to look at the semantics.
Yeah.
Because this is something we can only do. What we have to then look at is, okay, because we support both GNMI and netconf, is this only a netconf only thing, or should we also have this for GNMI or for other protocols?
Does GNMI also have a similar interface?
So GNMI has the GNMI has only a set, a get, and a subscribe, and maybe one more thing. But there is other gRPC services that they have, but it's not GNMI, it's GNOI and GNSI and stuff like that. So they have a set of other services that are sitting next to GNMI to perform, you could say, operations is how they call it with GNOI. Now, I don't think they have something like a database or something like that. So the actions are a bit different. So I think the protocols are a bit different from that perspective, because the actions are really like copy a file or execute a ping or something like that. That's the type of actions or the GNOI operations that are there. So I think I have the feeling they are a bit diverse from each other.
Are these defined sort of universally, or so the netconf actions are defined as part of the Yang schema? So the Yang schema defines these actions, and then you specify the input and output types and parameters like you would for a configuration node through Yang.
Yes, so there is a set of RPCs that are defined, right? So here is so that's the GitHub itself, right? I don't know where the documentation is.
So these services, GNOI and so on, it's part of that GNOI definition, right? And it's not part of the schema or whatever. This is the GNOI service, and this is the proto for it, and implement it or leave it.
Yes. But so there is a set of so it's not like there is a spec. The spec is basically GitHub. So this is as a Linux, for example, right? But yeah, so it's basically defined as on GitHub. Basically, it's not like it's an RFC. So that's the difference between GNMI and the G suite versus the netconf suite. Netconf is IETF specified. GN suite is basically done in the open in GitHub, and it's coming from Google mainly. Yeah, I think Severin posted a link here with the docs. You see my screen? Yeah. Yeah. So here are a set of, yeah. So I probably need to put it in. So you have a set of RPCs that are defined, and now I don't believe that every vendor has everything implemented. But yeah.
Okay, but it's defined externally from the schema.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another difference, right? So the
yeah. So yeah. Yeah.
Inside.
So in netconf you have both the operations as well as the scheme. So you have Yang as a modeling language, and then you have netconf as a protocol, and the RPCs are defined in the protocol. Here it's similar. So it's basically GN suite is defining the operations, right? And then the schema is for GNMI is Yang, and then for the others is defined based on the RPC, I think. Yeah. So from that point of view, it's similar, but they are not aligned from its conception, if you will. But so what I think we have to do to support this is somehow, whether we define them in the config or we separate them, I don't think it matters that much, right? But we somehow have a post and a pre and a post trigger. And you would be able to specify a set of procedures, if you will, that you can then invoke. And the idea is we would invoke them always we would invoke the pre-actions before we do the transactions. Then we do the config transaction, and then we do the post actions. That seems to be, from a high-level point of view, how I'm thinking about it. Now we have to probably come up with a capability on how to do that, because I have the feeling it seems to be better not to put that in the config CR. Is put it probably, maybe we should define config actions, right, or pre actions and post actions. And then it's a matter of the person who transacts, because right now the change is that the target, there's a target config reconciler that groups, basically that does a lookup of all the configs, right, and deviations, and basically puts them together. So in this case, it could basically I look at the target actions or the actions, and maybe we define post actions and pre and post actions, and then you look up all the post actions and pre actions, and then maybe there is a protocol section inside, right? We say this is netconf and this is GNMI, and then you something like that, right? If that makes sense. So it's what I'm trying to say is that and then we have to find a way that how we map that into the data server. I don't know, Marcus, you have any comments? High level, without.
No, not yet. Haven't got my head around it.
Yeah, so I have the feeling it's better to, I just conceptually, maybe we have to think, let it sink a little bit for a week and maybe discuss it again next week, but to come up with a high-level framework on how to support it, right? So maybe I should put that as a comment in the PR, right? High-level tools. Define a pre-action. Is it pre-action? Yeah.
Yeah, pre and post action.
CR, right?
So each of the actions would be a different CR. I'm in the end, I think that having an action CR that could either be defined as pre and post makes things a bit simpler.
Yeah, correct. Oh, that's even better. Yeah, so you can basically say action CR, right? And in there we have so the spec says pre or post, right? Fine. Type or something probably, right? Pre and post, and then the action or something like that, right? Or
Action and inputs presumably would also be necessary.
Inputs and expected output, or something like that, right?
Yeah, I guess the output would be a status or something like this as well. Then you could have visibility.
And are these synchronous? Sure. So like with the transaction set, they are, know there is a timeout.
Things
Yeah,
that will be they need to be there before the config. So would it make more sense to have a flag like in the config? In the config, have a field where you would then reference this action, or how? Because if in the cluster, otherwise,
what we would do,
what's first.
So what we would do, Fabien, is the following. So right now with the target reconciler, I mean, it's not merged yet, but assume we merge it. What happens is that when, so it's triggered by either a config CR change or a deviation CR change, right? So in this case, it would also include the action CR change, right? So in other words, if any of these change, what would happen is, so right now the thing is the following. So so I fetch all the config CRs and all the deviation CRs, right? So in this case, we would also fetch all the action CRs, and then we determine change and what have you, right? So there's a whole process that basically determines whether to transact. And what would then happen is that the pre-action CR would be executed first, or all the RPCs that are associated. So you get a result. If they fail, you stop, right? If they succeed, you execute the transaction CR with how it is right now, right? So basically, you execute all the config, and then once that succeeds, you do the post-action CRs, RPCs. And if those succeed, you say done. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that makes. I'm just thinking, like, if, for example, Flux applies all the resources, you need to make sure that all are there. Like, if for example, you reconcile them already when only half the resources are synced, then you might be missing something. So
yes, so that is, but that problem we have today as well, right? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, but the actions are sort of like a one-shot thing. Well, I mean, you can repeat them, but they have to be done at specific time points, right? So I think that Fabian's idea is to have the config CR also have a reference to the actions associated with it. So if the action doesn't exist, then you can already stop before you continue and apply the CR. The config snippet, sorry, before applying the config snippet.
And is it then not better to actually add it in the configs?
It depends how reusable these actions are, I suppose.
Because the problem with this referencing is then you kind of, it's not there, you reconcile again. I mean, you can do it, of course. The problem with referencing is always you need to do additional lookups and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, you could, so you could basically say, you could do a reference in it to say, okay, this config is dependent on the other one, and as a result, you don't execute. Yeah, that's a way to resolve it, right? Yeah. If there is a true dependency of a config, you have to add a reference. But if you add a reference, you can always say put it part of the config. You see, so it's a chicken.
Yeah.
So we have to say there is a reference.
I guess the reference can be at the same time as without, like, you can say if there's no reference, then you just then you do exactly what you described. And if there is a reference field, you wait for those actions to be there, and you only apply those actions that are in the reference field. But
Yeah, my point is just if you do a reference, just put the action inside of the config is my point. Because but
Yeah, then you have the question of how do you read out the results, right? Because say, for example, you have 2 or 3, n config snippets all pointing to the same action CR. And you want to read the output of this action, right? What the value is. Where would this be? If it's on the action CR, then you could in theory overwrite it by performing the same action for multiple different targets. In this case, the action output should be as part of the status of the config, maybe.
Yeah, so if you put, and my view is that if you put the action, let's say CR or whatever in the config, there will be a status for the action and a status for the config, right? So there will be 2 statuses.
Yeah.
So 2 conditions with a dedicated type. If you put the action CR separated, but there would anyhow be one, I think we would need one, we could use it like a set or something like an action CR set like the config is doing. So we would anyhow, in my view, need 1 per target. Whether the controller does it or the user does it doesn't really matter, right?
1 per target or 1 per config? Because in theory, you could have different actions associated with different configs for the same target. No?
Yes, but so here is the thing: is like today we put all the configs together, right? So in other words, we would also group all the actions together. Because what happens today is you have a bunch of configs. Maybe let me make a drawing to make it easier to understand.
I mean, otherwise we can just start with the simple case of just having an action CR, and then we see how far we get with that.
Yeah, that's another option. Yeah,
having it too complicated with.
It's always good to think a little bit about it, to have a bit of a sketch. So today what we have is we have a bunch of, so this is a target, right? So this is a target. So you have a bunch, and this is a config CR, right? Right? And there's another one for the same target. So I'm just putting 1 target right now. So the one option is to put here an action CR that is referenced by this guy, right? And then you can have another one which is either referenced by the same, right, or by a different one, right? So that's one option. The other option is that you make the config CR also include action CR, right, somehow, right? The problem that you lose is you lose this ability, but what I was trying to say before is that all of this is taken together right now. So before they were handled individually, each of these. Now what is happening is all the configs that have changed are grouped together, and they are acted upon as a group per target. Right? So in other words, what I would do is somehow figure out which action CR exists for these configs, right? And whether they are pre or post, you execute them either pre or post, if you see what I mean. If there was, yeah.
If you had multiple config CRs,
Yes.
and they, no, that's okay, because this pre and post actions are going to be based on the transaction of the entire set. So anything that's in any of these, say you have these 2 config CRs, the pre actions, I guess, would be aggregated together, and both those actions, if each of these CRs had an action associated with it, the pre would be done together before, and the post would be done together at the end, regardless of which source it is. Okay, yeah, that's
correct. So then the question is, do you need to make a link to the config, right? So the point I think that Fabian is making, yeah, if they are not existing yet and there is a config, then yeah, if you don't have the reference, you can transact the config without this, right? So that's why a reference makes sense, right? Or the other alternative is you put them inside.
Yeah.
Inside you don't, the disadvantage is it's not, it violates the Unix philosophy, right, of doing one thing. But it solves the dependency issue. And anyhow, I mean, the action segregates them, right? So plus the other disadvantage, if you need the same actions on different configs, you have to replicate them, duplicate them, which is better with the reference.
But then we get to this point of where we store the output, right? If we have a reference, will we store the outcome of the action in the config CR, or do we store it in the action CR, but with a let's say a map for the target that it's gotten the response from?
My view is the following. So like if the action CR fails, right, so let's say, then the action, so if we put the action inside of the config, right, then there will be a condition. You have to segregate it with a condition. If the action fails and the let's say the pre-action fails and not the config itself, I think that what will happen is that the there's another interesting question probably. So if the action fails, pre-action, we will never execute a config, right? If the post-action fails, we would have to revert the config, I assume. Right?
Yeah, the transaction would have to roll back, yeah.
Okay, we have that mechanism in place these days, so that's good. And the reporting will be done again through the condition, right? Or a dedicated action CR.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking about is, let's say we have 3 targets, right? Which are all the same CNF, but 3 copies. And obviously the config CR has to target, I mean, you specify the target in the config CR, right? The action CR theoretically could be used by, for the config, we also, let's say, have the three config CRs pointing to each of the 3 targets. And within that config CR, we point to this action, right? So there's a singular action that's then referenced by these 3 config snippets. In that case, if 2 of the 3 configs successfully apply and the last one doesn't, the action would then show that it was not ready, right?
Yeah, so in that case, I think it's better to report on an individual level, right? So in other words, the action CR is an action CR, but its execution happens on the config. So it's better to report the condition as part of the config rather than on the action CR.
Yeah.
If we need this one-to-many, I mean, we can also
we can
one-to-one.
Yeah,
I mean,
they can also be restricted this way. Yeah, that's true. It's just it's what I
I mean, then you can just set in the status of the action this config name, and you
you can do what
maybe we can restrict it to one-to-one to keep it simple, but
but you can treat it like the config set, right? So in the config set, what we do, right, is basically, so what happens with the config set is a config set, if we figure out how many targets it applies to, right? So what we do is we actually create from a config set an individual config CR. So in other words, the set becomes, if it's 3 targets and it applies to 3 targets, there is 3 configs that is derived from it, and the reporting is on the config, and then the config sets get the aggregate of the individual configs. So it basically bubbles up automatically.
But this would mean that if it fails on one of these targets, the whole config would be rolled back?
No, and so this then depends on what is your rollout strategy, right? So today in the config set, the way it works, it would if one fails and the other two succeed, one will fail and the other two succeed. So we don't roll back. We do have another PR that is being worked on, which is network-wide transactions. In that case, they roll back.
Okay.
So the idea is that the rollout strategy determines how it behaves in terms of if it's network-wide transaction or not. That determines your rollout strategy determines what the action is based on failure.
Okay.
So in config set today, it's not not network-wide. So it means that if 2 or 9 fail, if one fails or multiple fails, they don't get reverted. They don't get deleted. But the idea is to make it more flexible, that you can actually say what your behavior is that you want to have, and then you act based accordingly, right?
Yep, makes sense.
So what do we have? Let's maybe so we need status reporting, right? We need maybe referencing, right? Right.
Yeah, one-to-one or one-to-many.
Yeah.
We have to put that out.
1 or n-to-1, right?
Mhm.
Or 1-to-n, whatever you call it. Sorry.
Yeah.
What else did we discuss? Roll back, right?
Yep. Rollback, how to manage. Well, it's more for the. Oh yeah, okay. At the end, if the post fails, to roll back the whole transaction.
Yeah. Just I want to capture a little bit the thought, right?
Yep.
Roll back the transaction. The good thing is we have a lot of infrastructure in place already for this, which is good.
Do we need to have a rollback command, a rollback action?
Is it not
Like what
implicit?
if the pre-action failed, configuration is being pushed, and then like pushing configuration fails? Like we need to support anything that undoes the initial command.
On failure action, sort of to reset the state.
Something like that, yeah.
Good point. Yeah, probably. Yeah, we probably need the same, right? It's mainly for the pre, right?
Or for the post, if you have a chain of posts, and let's say you have 3 posts, and the last one fails, then you probably want to roll back the previous 2, if possible. It might not be possible.
On failure.
Yeah, it can also be part of the spec, I assume.
Yeah, I think the behavior of the action should be specified in the spec, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So what are the key decisions we have to make, right? Is separate action CR or not, right? It seems to be better to separate it, right?
Yeah, and I think for simplicity, having a one-to-one is easier as well, because you don't have to handle these cases where you have to then aggregate the results somehow.
Yeah, but that's not rocket science these days. But yeah,
We also need to consider southbound, right? Like config server towards data server. Is this going to be part of the set transaction RPC, or
I would do a dedicated one, right? Or that's a debate. We can, because right now you have a lock based on that, right?
lock
Okay.
based on the transaction, yeah.
Yeah.
But we could, well, I mean, we could manage to have the transaction ID match and then like inherit that lock. So that would be fine, I guess.
In the end, I guess it would be sort of the process. You'd open a transaction, you would run the pre action, right? Open the transaction, run the pre actions, run the config set, run the post actions, and then close the transaction. And if at any point during that you fail, then all the previous steps should be rolled back.
Mhm.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, I have the feeling it's better to have another RPC, Marcus.
Yeah. Would at least keep the set transaction RPC clean, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Someone who doesn't need anything like that.
Right now, the set transaction is opening the transaction as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. So today we only use set transaction RPC, and that so there is a timeout, right? Which you set when so it's like netconf or yeah. So basically what you do is you say, I'm going to do transact. You set a bunch of data. You can put a timeout, right? If you don't acknowledge or confirm within the time window, it will automatically roll back. If you confirm within the time window, or if you, I think, not confirm, you can delete it. You can actually fail. And if there was an error, it automatically reverted. I think that's kind of the more or less how it behaves, Marcus, right?
Yeah.
It's like netconf. So we kind of copied the way netconf operates because we feel that has a good maturity in terms of usage, and there's a lot of experience. So we kind of said, okay, let's not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Would it make sense to split it into something that starts a transaction? So like when you have the relational databases, you can do a begin transaction, then you can do your steps, and then you do end transaction or whatever it's called. Would it make sense to do something like this where you open a transaction, you get an ID response, and then in your transaction, in your action steps, you can then action and the config set steps, you would then pass this transaction ID, and then this is all managed by the data server. So
yeah,
after you have your begin, so it's not implicitly begun a transaction, but you explicitly have to begin a transaction.
Yeah, we have to do something like that, I think. Yeah, I agree. So today that's implicit with the transaction set. So it's automatically a begin, but maybe we should just have a transaction begin and end or something, or confirm. And then you can have other RPCs that are in it, right?
Yeah, exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So like transaction start, right? Then and then transaction confirm
Or rollback.
Or you can also say stop, right? Or roll back or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Or transaction end, start and end fits.
Yeah. Oops. What happened? Or cancel or something like that, right? I think that's what we have right now, I think. And there in the cancel, yeah. I mean, yeah, this is like details at the moment, but okay. So what I propose is let's think a little bit, let's think this through, right? Because sometimes it's good to let it sink a little bit, right? But I think this has probably some right? Discussed. Purine. Right. As some what would be good someone to do is basically figure out how this action CR looks like, right? What should be inside to come up with a model. And then maybe we can, I just let it sink maybe for a week, right? Just to think it through a little bit, right? And then at some point we have a proper design, then we can say, okay, let's start implementing it. Right? Is this urgent, Alex, Zander, for you guys?
It would be useful. As I said, we have a temporary solution. So it's not that it's going to stop us from proceeding, but it would be good to have at least some steps taken towards it, so we can also show that this is in the pipeline and being looked into.
Yeah. Okay. So not super urgent, but medium.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I understand, currently we have one CNF that's trying to be onboarded with this, but another one will come soon that will have more actions as well. So, we have a temporary workaround, but it would be nice to have
a full solution, so that we have it integrated and a full-blown solution. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But then let's focus on your use case with the action. If you guys could have a look at the action CR and see how it looks like?
Yep, we can do that for next week. Yeah.
And then we can, once we have somehow a sketched up design, maybe, Marcus, also think about it from a data server point of view. And then, but I think the infrastructure we are starting to put in place, of course, we need to merge the deviation first, right? But I think once the deviation is merged, probably then this has higher priority than the network-wide transaction. Because so there is also the network-wide transaction that is in the pipe, which is basically a higher level. So it basically uses the transactions that we have, but actually looks at them as a whole across multiple targets. And if their rollout policy is network-wide transaction, it would, if one fails, it would roll back. It would cancel them, and then it will roll back. That's kind of the other thing. But I feel that this is higher priority over that one.
The whole thing would even reach all the way into schema server, right? At least for the netcoms Yang based thing, right? Because right now we only expose the schema elements, but not the RPCs and so on. So I mean, one approach we can take is like whatever parameters and action names we get, we trust in God, right? and just forward it. But yeah, at some point it might be good thing to even validate those parameters and action names, right?
Yeah. I believe that Goyang does parse out these actions. If I remember, I've seen types for input and output, which are sub statements of the action.
Yeah.
So yeah. I imagine
at least processes the stuff in the input. But it's definitely not exposed in schema server, because we do this translation from the Goyang struct, like the processed one, into what we present then and we thought we need in the data server. So there is definitely no RPC based information that we've
at the moment
that we've built there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That took a little bit longer, but it's okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I underestimated the time there.
Then logging, yeah.
Yeah, so the logging framework, this was something that I noticed when doing debugging and so on, that the log messages didn't contain contextual information often for where failures happened. So I spent a bit of time looking into logging frameworks and structured logging, where you could add context information as the execution of the steps progresses. And I created an MR, a draft MR on the data server, where I use this logger.logger interface to store the logger in the context that's then passed throughout the execution of the data server steps. So there is logging for the syncing part. So when you're getting information from the device, for the deviation watching, for then sending the information back to the device as well on the data server.
And did you look at what I did on the config server? Because I have something similar, I think, which is I'm using.
Yeah. Yes, I think you're using the Go built-in one, which is relatively new, right? This.
Yeah, it's 3 years old or something like that. So yeah, so I basically built the same interface across the structured logging from Go.
Yeah.
How different is that? I'll have a look at it, but.
I don't know exactly. The idea is that I took the hints from the cube builder scaffolding.
The same. So if you look to this package here, oops, I'm doing, but yeah. So that's basically the thing that I did. So it's just a wrapper around slog.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if slog is the Go one, right? This is the Go built-in one.
Yes.
I don't know if it complies with the logger.logger, logr.logger interface, but there are a lot of these conversion libraries that allow you to convert between the different interfaces. This logger.logger one is the one that Cube Builder scaffolding gives, and this is the one I'm familiar with from previous operators and so on, and other Go projects. So I used this one. The idea is that you have a universal interface that you can store into the context, context.context
Yeah, it's
type.
the same here. Yeah, it's the same here. So it basically does that, and then you parse it out, and then basically I use the controller runtime as a way to convey it, and then yeah, you get everything out. I took the controller runtime, so I think it's the same.
It's probably the same, just a different backend. You used the slog, and I used zap. That's presumably
because
the difference.
slog is I use standard slog because it's built in Go, right? So it's optimized for it's standard Go, if you will.
Yeah, I think that I spoke briefly with Marcus about it before, and his idea was that it didn't matter the backend that was used, just that there is some interface, some common interface that you can then use this logging functions on top of, and so that's what I tried to do.
See, if you try to integrate the tree part basically into another software project and so on, you would want to have an interface that you require, and then be able to extend your own logger to meet this interface and have a common logging, and not like this one's being logged with library X and this one's being logged with library Z, and then the whole logging is not consistent, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. No, but No, we had this discussion like 2 years ago or a year ago, and then I built this because S-Log was there, right? So that was our mechanism that we kind of agreed before. I think, Alexander, you were involved, right? To actually go forward. So that's why I'm bringing it up, is how different is this like that? Because the idea was to use this mechanism as our common mechanism.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we decided to use S-Log as the backend because it's standard Go, right? And we are using Go.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. I think the important part of this was that we wanted to move towards structured logs.
Correct.
And having context information there as well is important to be able to understand which parts of the execution is responsible for this specific log message. If there are issues, then we have context on the device that was targeted, the schema that was the source of the data and this kind of things. And obviously, this is helpful for us to then figure out where things are going wrong or where things are going right.
My point is we should line up between config server and data server, right? Because in config server, we have done this for a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than coming up with something new necessarily, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can then look into S-Log
and then see what it says.
Yeah, that's fine. But just as a step forward, I think it would be good to align this. It would be important for this. So if that's something that you're also on board with, then I think that I'll revisit the PR. It needs to be updated as well a little bit. Things have changed since I opened it, so I can then look into the S-Log part as well and see if this is simple to change over or not.
I mean, I'm using it from the config server a while ago because of the fact that we saw that we had different logging capabilities, and we wanted to. This was a topic that was discussed, let's say, a year ago, even longer, I think.
Yeah, good.
All right. Then next topic is deviation corrections.
Yeah, this is scheduled to take a bit of time. Maybe we can put this for the next week because I'd like to hear some of the updates for the deviations and transactions and what the progress is there. And what the next steps would be for that and getting that merged in. I think it's something that will help us quite a bit as well. Maybe we can swap those two around and then move the deviation to the next week, if that's fine for everybody else as well.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think, Hans, you started testing, right? You sent me a text, but I haven't looked at it yet.
Yes, I've started testing, but I'm still hitting some roadblocks. I think it has to do with the ignore delete intent flag that we introduced, because whenever I try to test deviations and I try to run through the regular CI/CD test for that PR, it's already failing. So something is breaking, all right.
Okay, we'll have a look.
Yeah.
But then the plan is for this to be integrated in the next, next week.
My goal is to merge it ASAP, right? So the whole idea. But we have to get through CI in order to ensure that everything works, right? Otherwise, we break something. So the goal is my goal is to get this merged ASAP, meaning this week.
Yeah.
And take it from there, because your action probably is built on this capability, right?
Yeah, as well.
Yeah. And I also saw that Fabien, you pushed a PR for the fix for the dry run, so that I tested that. That's okay. So we'll merge that together, right?
Oh, I just closed it because I saw you have it.
Yeah, I have it, but I tested yours as well. But it's
exactly the same you have, so that's why I closed it now. But
I fixed it in the same PR. It's not a good practice, but it was just it was a simple line. So but I tested both of them, so it's like okay. And then Yeah, maybe I'll give a quick wrap up on what happened in IETF maybe for the last 5 minutes, right? So I will post the slides onto the Discord. So the discussion was, maybe I can send you this, I can go through the slides quickly. 1 second. Did you see the slides? I posted them, I think, on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so basically, so there is a bit of an effort ongoing in IETF on, where is it? On yeah, on automation in general, right? And so I basically proposed the SDC as a framework, right? So basically, the idea was to actually show a little bit what the schema can do, right? And so in other words, the schema, so what we do today in SDC is basically all the validation logic, right? On top of it. But the idea is also to have SDKs generated from the schema so that you can use it in the client, right? So because today we typically use templates, right? And templates you need to maintain, right? Because they are derived from the schema. And of course, you can, it's a good way to go as long as you don't have an SDK, but it is much more simpler if you have an SDK.
I think we lost him.
I think so too.
Okay, it's not just us.
Right. Yeah, considering we only have 2 minutes or 1 minute left in the call before Google Meet will kick us out, I don't know if we can, yeah, if we should already close the call rather than wait for them to return. Ah, there he is. Sorry.
Here.
Yeah.
Don't know what happened. My internet got down. Yeah, you see my screen again?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I was saying is that when your schema changes, you actually can see immediately that your SDK is no longer aligned with the schema, and you get through your IDE, you can actually figure out the delta. And so you could generate your output YAML from an SDK rather than through a template, right? So the idea is, yeah, is that a question? I don't see the hands, by the way. Was that a question? Ah. No, so it's okay, right? Yeah, so that you actually through an SDK.
There was a question if there was the recording available. Sorry.
Yes, it will be posted, but the problem is that they record, so it's a whole slot of 2 hours. So you actually, I'll have to find in which time frame it was. But there is, yeah, there is a recording. Yeah. So we discussed that, and then we discussed also, we started to discuss Choreo, but I ran out of time, so we didn't really go into this part at all, or not as much. But yeah, so that's what happened last week. But I'll post the slides in the I think, and yeah, I had lots of good follow-up from lots of people and discussions amongst people to get things going, right? So there is a lot of, I get more and more interest in this project, which is good. And there was one more thing, and maybe we'll add that to the agenda for next week. There is a discussion to move this project as part of the CNCF, by the way. And so the question is if I'll add it to the agenda, whether some people have objections to us doing that or not. The advantage of having it to the CNCF, it would be governed by the CNCF. I mean, it would still be governed by the same people, so that would not be a change. But the good thing is that this is a Linux. This will become a Linux Foundation project, which means that from a support and overall governance and point of view, it has much more things surrounding it. So it would become like a CNC. Yeah, so it's basically a Linux Foundation project. So the idea is that we would start initiating the process. At the end of the summer is the target. And what it means, you always start as incubating, right? And the idea is that you progress towards becoming like graduated, which means that this project is very mature and people are using it and blah, 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 right? So, but I'll discuss that in more depth maybe next week. I'll add that to the agenda. Yeah. All right. Anything else? If not, then thanks, and we'll be in touch. If there's any questions, please use the Discord, right? Or whatever means to get in contact.
Yeah.
All
Thanks.
right. Yes.
All right. Cheers. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.